in this last part of chapter 3, which is the relevance of Moffat to contemporary rhetoric, Andrews is really making his argument for the breadth of English, but mostly his focus is less like resurrecting a discipline and saying rhetoric should be the foundation for a lot of these ideas, and here's why. And so he goes about laying it out. And he really starts with, and this is going to come up in the next chapter that you read, he really looks at the idea of literacy. So if we look at K-12 English, in K-12 English, we're focused on producing writing at developmentally appropriate levels and reading text, and then with the reading of text, producing the right answer in alignment with those texts. And the right answer is culturally normed. And so he's talking about how literacy is really more about producing a result and not about the ways that we change our practices to appropriately fit the situation. So when you're in class and you're sending a message, you're sending a message to me, you're going to use specific words. Like you're going to say, "Good morning, Dr. Van Steele," instead of like, "Hey, yo, what's up?" You're not going to say that to, you might say that to a professor. I don't know all your professors, right? But for the most part, especially because I'm an online instructor for you, you're probably not going to approach your introduction or your greeting to me in that informal of a fashion. Or maybe you will now, just to be like, "Hey, I watched your video," right? So what Andrews is then getting at is the fact that you are able to recognize that difference and make those shifts. That is rhetoric. That's not literacy. It's not producing a result, it's adjusting practices. And we need to focus more on the adjusting of practices as opposed to producing results, so that we'll actually produce more effective results or higher results or whatever it is we're looking for from the results. Usually it's to compare to other countries, to determine the quality of our education system, those kinds of things. And he said that if we start to do that, we'll actually see greater alignment or kind of connection between K-12 and higher education. And so it'll make an English class, especially like a first year composition class, so in this case at Millersville English 110, it'll seem more familiar to students when there's no literature, because for the most part, none of our classes have literature at that level, but students come into the class expecting to read literature because that's what the K-12 version of English or English language arts always centered around. And the difference between those two and the divide between those two is part of what's causing the problem in us coming up with this unified view of what English is, and then communicating that to all of the different stakeholders that are necessary. So he starts his conversation, and again, it's going to come back up later, that's why I wanted to touch on it here, with literacy or literacies are not enough. The concept really is rhetoric, and what we're going for is a unification between what the broad heading of English is between K-12 all the way through PhD, so that we can really focus on the communicative practices so that people understand, and this is where we start to break it down, the who, the for whom, the what, and the why in a meaningful way to produce a communication for that situation that is appropriate. And that's where his contemporary definition of rhetoric really is situated. Let me know if you have any questions.